Hello and welcome back to Ride Rescue. In this episode of the Pontiac build, I'm going to get the front end all aligned and put the grill in. And the grill, when the previous owner removed it, he removed the whole front end section all in one piece. So there's an upper grill area, there's two grill sections, there's a lower grill area, and it just bolts side to side on the fenders and bolts to the core support. So it's pretty simple to just slide that in. Then I've got all the wiring that I've got to put back in behind it, and I've got the headlights that I need to restore, and the turn signals, and make sure everything works. So in this episode, I'll walk you through all that. In order to get the hood lined up, there's several areas around the hood that you have to watch for. I did get the fender to fit the way I wanted it to, which then gives me the guide in this corner for the cowl cover. I got the height right for the cowl cover, I got the height right for the hood, and then as I go down this seam of this body line, this line was way too tight. So the only way to move that fender over or the hood over is either just the hood itself, the hood hinges, or to adjust the core support, because the fender is actually bolted to the core support. So the only way to open up this gap is to either take the hood and twist it sideways, adjusting the hinges, which will end up taking this corner forward or backwards. You can see this gap here is probably a little bit big on both edges. So adjusting this fender to the door, I have the body lines exactly where I want them. So this gap is wide on this side and is too close on the other side. So I will pull this over and make that gap even. The edges of the hood, then I can adjust each corner at the windshield. But as it comes down to the nose of the car, the alignment on each edge here and the alignment left to right has to be adjusted through the core support itself. So the core support, let me open up the hood. So the core support is mounted at the base of the radiator on two bolts at the top of the frame. I left those bolts loose so that I can move the core support side to side if I need to, and I ended up needing to. The way the front end of this front clip sat, it did set a little too far to the driver's side. So by taking a long 2x4, running along the frame, I was able to push the hood, the whole front clip sideways just a little bit to get the hood centered in the hole. At the back of the hood, where the hinges are, I was able to get a perfect gap on both sides. But at the front, at the grill, it was too tight. I was scraping down both edges, left and right. So what I ended up doing on this core support, you can see it better on this side, the only way I could open up that opening was to shim the core support and this front header panel. Both fenders had been bumped and dented, and I repaired those dents, but I didn't realize the corners of the fenders were dimpled in. So you can either push those fenders out, this area here where it mounts, get behind that and jack it out, which is pretty difficult to do. That's a pretty strong area, or just shim them. And one side of this car was shimmed from the factory, so I just used a similar shim and put in just a thin shim on both sides. That allowed me to push those fenders out just enough now that I have a good consistent gap front to back on both sides. The grill, that top panel and the lower panel was all still assembled. from the factory. I don't think it's ever been taken apart. There's 3 bolts on the top and only 1 bolt on the bottom of each side, and the whole grill comes out. Previous owner had removed the grill and just set it aside on the floor in the garage, so it was covered with cobwebs and dust and dirt. It cleaned up fantastic. You can see the chrome, no pits. I just took some steel wool and shined it up beautifully. On the turn signals, they're also pot metal chrome. The bases of them, of course the plastic is not, but both of those are flawless. The chrome is in fantastic condition on those as well. This particular lens on the turn signal has got some fine cracks in it, but it's solid. So I'll use those. I'll keep those. I plugged them in. They do work. The signals themselves are not working. I don't know if the flasher is bad, so I have to work on that. But the park lights work. And speaking of lights, I'm going to start working on the headlights now. We'll get those cleaned up. And to my surprise, of the 4 headlights, 3 of them are the original T3 headlights. So pretty amazing. That's a pretty rare thing to find on these General Motors cars anymore, is the original T3s. And I'll show those once I get them installed and explain what that means. Headlights wise, I've got a box full of headlight parts that came in the trunk of the car. Typically, I would restore these parts back to new condition as well, but again, with this car, I wanted to keep that old rustic feel and look to it. And most of these are covered up anyways with the trim and the headlights, so not much of it will be seen. But these particular brackets, the backing plates, are rusty. Normally I would bead blast those or clean them up and get rid of the rust and paint them all nice and shiny. But they're just going to go back into the car, and one day somebody will probably restore it, but for now, just going to use them as is. And what is really cool about these old parts that I have in the trunk, a couple of the original factory General Motors T3 headlights are still in this box. These T3 headlights are very rare, and they have just vanished. There are some manufacturers now that are remaking them and repopping them, but these are the factory originals. Of the 4, there are 3 of them here that actually work. The other one was broken. So there is another T3 headlight that is of a newer vintage. This particular T3, the 2 of them are from the early 1960s, so they match the year of this car. And there's one other one that is a newer vintage, and that would be this one. So this T3 symbol is from the late 60s cars, or maybe even in the early 70s. But there are actually, now that I'm looking at it, there are 3 T3 headlights of the original vintage. One of them doesn't work, but and then one of them is a different year. But pretty cool to have the original T3s. One thing I'm noticing on these headlights, before I'm putting them into the car, I wasn't going to restore them, but this panel covers up the red paint of the fender, and that will be showing. I can't have that rusty, ugly piece showing, so I will take that off. There's another one that goes across the bottom here that covers up that area. It's also all rusty, so those 2 pieces I'll restore. The rest I'll just polish these headlight surrounds and the headlights themselves, put them back in. Okay, I sanded the parts down and cleaned them off with some wax and grease remover. I like to use the professional Rust-Oleum. It's got some rust proofing additives in it that will help seal the rust as well as prevent any future rust, as long as it's just cleaned up real good. Just mist it on a little bit so we don't have to worry about any runs. Of course, when they're laying flat, they're not going to run. Once it tacks off real quick, and just put on another light coat. And for a part like this, you don't need a whole lot of paint. We want them to dry quickly so that I can put them on. So I've got those freshly painted parts sitting next to my heater so they'll dry quickly. And then what I'll do is I'll start prepping and getting all these parts ready. I got to change out the glass in a couple of those headlights. I want to clean up the aluminum trim that goes around those. With the aluminum, it's not like chrome. Chrome, you can take a pad and sometimes you can get away with cleaning chrome with that and not damaging it. But I like to use a double-aught or a triple-aught fine steel wool, especially on aluminum. It's a lot gentler. It'll clean up the trim really well without doing any damage to it. With aluminum, it scratches pretty easy, and it's an anodized finish, so it doesn't take much to take the anodizing off. This one's got a couple little dings in it. I'll set that aside for repair work. This one looks perfect, which is wonderful because these are extremely hard to find, and if you can find one that's perfect, they're very expensive. I've seen these going for hundreds of dollars now. It's got a little bit of rust that has creeped around the edge. The steel wool will do a good job of cleaning that off. But you can see there's a lot of heavy pitting and corrosion on the aluminum here. It's taking the finish off and it's actually pitting. Normally I would want to clean that up if it was seamed, but it's not being seamed. And the reason why that got so much damage is in this little cradle right here, where you can see the rust. That moisture and rust has transferred onto the aluminum and has damaged it. But since it is well hidden, I don't need to worry about repairing that area. Just steel wooling up the bright work is enough that I can make these look very, very nice. I don't know if it shows up very well on the video, but you can see it brings the luster back to the aluminum without leaving any scratches. The edge of this on the outside of the fender has been lightly bumped. So while I have it off, I'll try to massage that a little bit. If I use a piece of plastic or wood, something fairly smooth and not too rough, I can massage that and bring that dent out. It looks factory original. Still a little bit of a divot, little ding right there. I'll massage that down too. If I keep the flat blade of the screwdriver smooth and work the back side of that dent, I can bring it up without leaving any creases or scratch marks on the surface. Very nice. So of the trim pieces that I have, the other three are all dinged. This one just has a small divot, a couple rock chips. This one, pretty obvious. That's got a pretty good cave in. And then this one also has a pretty good divot. Of the three, I think this one is going to be the easiest to smoothen out. since it's aluminum and it's anodized, I'm not going to be able to make it perfect. It would take a lot of tooling and filing and sanding, and then it'd have to be re-anodized. So I'm going to just kind of work it as much as I can. It's not perfect by no means, but neither is the car's. It's got some scratches, it's got some light dings, but very presentable. This headlight has been replaced. This is the original T3. As you can see, that headlight is no good. And one of the T3 headlights is missing one of these pieces. And I'm hoping I can remove one of these and drill it out and solder it back onto the back side of the T3 headlight. And it looks like one's missing over this one as well. By heating up these posts, I can just gently pull those off, and if all goes as planned, slide it on the other headlight. Like that. And hopefully, oh, it's still warm. Now, hopefully, if that cools enough that it's got some strength to it. Feels like it's strong. One T3 headlight restored. The steel wool works really good on the glass. Clean off the residue and the film. Water spots. Now let's just cross your fingers and hope it still works. There's the low beam. There's the high beam. Excellent. And the high beam. We have two perfect original T3 headlights. That's pretty cool. Okay, we have headlights. Let's make sure, cross our fingers, that they all work. Well, almost. That is the one T3 headlight that is a newer than the other three. Thank you for watching this episode of Ride Rescue. I really appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate your support and comments. Stay tuned for upcoming videos. Bye for now.